encourage is dialogue and spontaneous reaction and interaction. So there aren't any particular rules that we're going to enforce, but we just hope to make it an interesting discussion for the group. Congressman Cicilline is indicating that it's time for me to say, please be seated. I think they're waiting for me. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. The first question is designed to be a little bit of a look deep into your souls, if you will. And we've heard the principle, the very famous leadership quote, people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. So thinking about that line, what I'd like you to do is to reflect on a personal experience that you've had in your lifetime that will demonstrate to the audience here today that you have the capacity and the empathy and the notion of caring about the business community, and that you can go to Washington and truly be an advocate for this nation's business community. And when we're talking about business, we're talking about small business, we're talking about startup entrepreneur companies, we're talking about mid-sized businesses and even larger, well-established businesses. What can you tell us from an experience in your personal lifetime that would show us that you can be that advocate for the people in this room today, that are the risk takers and are the employers of this nation's workforce? So why don't we start with Congressman Cicilline. So a personal experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a company that I have been working with, which I think symbolizes kind of the struggles of Rhode Island manufacturers. And this is, I think in many ways, I feel very passionately about manufacturing. I think it's an opportunity for us to really grow that sector of Rhode Island's economy, really important to the future of our country's economy. And there's a manufacturer in Woonsocket who brought operations back from overseas, is really fighting to stay alive, and has a big customer who's also in Woonsocket, but can't get the capital to have the inventory necessary to have that customer. So here's a guy who's really trying to hold on to his business and grow it, but is having difficulty because he's competing with companies overseas that have better tax advantages. He brings his operation here, which he did, so he did the right thing. He's having difficulty getting capital to grow that business, and this is like, these are conversations we have on a very regular basis, because he's trying to hold on to this business and grow it. He's fighting against policies which undermine growing that manufacturing here in Rhode Island and Woonsocket. And he's got this moment where he has this customer who's going to be a huge customer and really help him grow his business, but he can't get the capital from the bank to have the inventory necessary to meet those demands. And I think it's an example of many of the things that are wrong with our manufacturing policy in this country. And you know, when you see the sweat, blood that he put into building this business and to buy it and then to bring the operations back, I think, you know, it's something we can fix by, you know, changing our tax policy so we don't incentivize bringing jobs overseas, making sure he has access to capital so he can grow his business, making sure it's easy for him to deal with the regulatory challenges. But it's an example, I think, of why I feel so passionate about manufacturing.
Doherty, talk about an experience that you had that can demonstrate that you have the empathy for the people in this room that have to make a payroll.
Well, my visit to businesses in the First District, by the way, we have 93,000 small businesses here in Rhode Island, and we want to grow those businesses. And I've been visiting for the last over a year, visiting businesses to listen to their challenges and understand, you know, beyond payroll, what the challenges are. You know, they're fighting with hoping for tax reform. They need consistency and confidence in the tax scheme and regulatory and licensure. But beyond that, the manufacturing companies that I've visited have told me that they could hire, and this is barring none, everyone I've gone to see has told me that they could hire 5 people tomorrow, or 10 people tomorrow morning, if they could match the job description with the skill sets. And we know we have a skill sets gap, and we know Our leaders have talked about it for quite some time, but we haven't had any action. So I've been talking about the plan for a one-year program for kids that graduate from high school so they can get a manufacturing degree with in areas like digital programming. But when I was telling this story to a group of young folks in the inner city, one of the fellows that was there was actually a little bit older, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said that I lack those skills, and I've been trying to get a job every day, and I can't find a job because I lack the skills. So we know what the problem is. We've identified the problem. We just haven't been able to put it together. I had the opportunity to go to the Public Occurrences Forum at Rhode Island College a couple of weeks ago and put on my Leadership Rhode Island Providence Journal. I commend them for that. And it continued to educate the Rhode Island and the workforce as to that very important piece to fill the skill sets gap, but we haven't been able to do it. So that's something I'm going to work on. And this fellow that had tears in his eyes, I promised him that when I get into Congress, I will set up not one but 2 different programs, and one of them will be free for the people who can't afford it, because he can't afford to go to work. He can't afford to pay for a course.
Mr. Hinckley.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here and for the opportunity. My empathy for small business comes from the fact that my entire life I've been in small business, and I'm not just talking my adult life. I grew up in a manufacturing family. In fact, my family's been manufacturing things in New England for well over 100 years. And I can tell you that the problems we have today are the problems that we had yesterday. And those problems are largely the government. When you build things and you manufacture things here in New England and America, I have news for all of you in this room. Based on my personal experience, the government's not your friend. Not your friend at all. When you grow up in a family business, at the dinner table, usually the conversation goes to what's happening in the family business. And very often in our conversations at home, sure, we talked about the people showing up to buy boats from us, the boats that we build, the boats that fed 120 families when someone purchased them. But more importantly, we talked about the government and its impact on our family business. And the government would show up in various forms. Sometimes it was the IRS, sometimes it was the EPA, sometimes it was OSHA, sometimes it was the Department of Labor, and many other organizations. And you know, they never had good news for us. They never showed up and said, Mr. Hinckley, how can we help you build more boats? And you'd think the government would get it, because every single hour that is worked, the government makes money. You'd think they'd say, how can we help this business grow so they hire more people so we make more money? So eventually, after the government dealt a really brutal blow to our family business in the form of the luxury tax, which I'm sure many people in this room remember because it devastated Rhode Island, and it's estimated about 35,000 people lost their jobs in the marine industry because of that piece of legislative genius from Washington, D.C. I started over and I started a computer company, and in that business today, just like the businesses that I've talked to in the last year and a half that I've been campaigning here in Rhode Island, uncertainty about how the government is going to treat them is the #1 priority. How much more is Obamacare going to cost? I'm talking to companies, their insurance premiums have gone up between 18 and 25%, and this piece of 2,000+ page legislation hasn't been implemented yet. What are the tax consequences going to be for my business next year with all this fiscal cliff? Not only that, the uncertainty. Over 70% of Americans say they don't like our tax code. They want something new. And the failure of leadership in Washington, D.C., the bitter partisanship of voting 100% on party lines, both parties are guilty of it, that lack of leadership translates to indecision, which translates to lack of clarity for businesses, which is why they can't hire that extra person, because they have no idea how much that person is going to cost. So the failure of leadership in Washington, D.C., driven by bitter partisanship, driven by policies of just one more tax and one more regulation and somehow we'll be prosperous, that is the problem that affected my life, my family's life, and is affecting Rhode Island businessmen and women today.
Senator Whitehouse,
Thanks, Lori.
Is government the friend of business?
It can be, and I go back to probably the formative experience when I first came into a government-related position back under Governor Sunland. And the #1 problem the business community had was workers' compensation. We had a workers' compensation system that was a national disgrace, a laughingstock, the most expensive one in the country. And I was put in charge of fixing it. And long story short, we did. It's now a national model. Rhode Island businesses have probably saved about, conservatively, $2 billion in workers' compensation costs since then. And what I learned from that was there's a lot to be made right. And if you think big and fight hard and get it right, you can create enormous results for the business community. More recently, we've been through a really difficult, the Bush meltdown, more or less. Worst economic recession since the Great Depression. And I've spent a lot of time out listening and traveling and visiting with small businesses. And the two things that I heard more than anything else when the real pain was on was the terrible anxiety that they felt about, was a customer going to come through the door? If they were a retail operation, was that next order going to come through? If they were a manufacturing operation, how far was this economy going to fall? So I think it was really important that we took the path that we did to support the economic growth that we've seen, painfully slow as it is. If you look at where what happened in Europe, where they followed the austerity model, you see GDPs shrinking, you see unemployment rising, and I think we did the right thing. And it was those experiences talking to people in Rhode Island that gave me the impetus to do that. I'll mention one personal story because I think this guy really emblemizes the courage that small businesses often represent. A company called National Marker in Smithfield, getting ready to shut down, have jobs moved overseas. Rhode Island guy sees his shot, thinks he can make it, thinks he can save his business, thinks he can run it. Like David's example, needs the capital. Can't get the capital because this was the moment when the banks were all seized up after the crisis, couldn't get access to capital. So we linked him with the Small Business Administration. He got into one of their capital programs. He's now the owner of it. There's 70 jobs, they're growing, and it's still in Smithfield. And but it, it was a real guts call by him to do that. Once again, had it not been for the SBA, that would never have happened. Those jobs would have been gone because the private market had contracted because of the Bush economic meltdown.
Mr. Riley.
I feel somewhat at odds with everyone else on this panel up here because I'm not a part of government yet, will be soon. I've owned and operated and financed about 20 businesses in my life. I currently run a small business in Narragansett, Rhode Island. I know exactly what it is that a businessman feels every day of my life. I don't have to go out on a tour to figure it out, but I did. I went out and I spoke to businessmen in Rhode Island all across the state. And it's the same problems that you might expect. It's the same that these people echo, but only here once or twice a year when they make their visits. But the problem is, as Barry said, we have a government that's a little bit too involved in what we want to do. And every time a business starts up and looks at what it has to overcome to actually open the doors and begin operating their dream, something that they've probably been thinking about for years and years, they have to go through a permitting process, they have a license process, they have to go to get loans at a bank, and usually it's one or two people that have this dream. And they have to hire all kinds of people just to get the doors open in the very beginning. So they need this capital at the startup. And where is this startup capital for this dream? It's not from the government. It might not even be from this room. It might not be from the documents that I had to receive. It actually comes from real risk takers. You're looking at one. I took risk with dreams. I took people, I'm taking a person right now in South County. She wants to operate a thing called Becoming Italian Today. She and her family make great sausages. And they sell them in Belmont Market in Wakefield, Rhode Island. And she wants to take this business to become a Rhode Island business. She talks about importing and exporting out of the Port of Quonset, which we've really not done a good job of developing. She talks about taking this business and taking it international. She talks about all those things, but guess what? She couldn't open the doors. She needed the very beginning financing. And so what did she do? She came to someone like me, an entrepreneur, a risk taker, So what did I look at? What do I look at when I invest in a small business? I look at the chance that she'll be stifled along the way by government regulations. I took her to EDC. I said, maybe they can give you a loan. They couldn't give her a loan. She wasn't far enough along the way. I took her to a bank. The bank said, well, we kind of need to see a little bit more about how this business is operating, and we're going to need a couple of business plans. She didn't have the time to do that. She was making sausage. Now, I've invested in companies like this. I've invested in high-tech companies. I currently own a portfolio of 20 companies. I've served as an advisor at a venture capital firm. I've served as an advisor at a bank. I know what's going on in the real world. I know what's going on in business. And I passionately care about small businesses. The best thing we can do is get out of their way, and when they ask for advice, give it to them quickly.
Congressman Langevin, an advocate for business. Your take on that?
Lori, thank you very much for having us here. I want to thank the Providence Chamber for hosting this event. So I have grown up in a small business family. Both my mom and my dad, when he was alive, they had several small businesses over the course of my life. And just recently, my mom, at 72 years old, just about a year and a half ago, started another small business. So I mentioned that I mentioned my mother's age, by the way. That's probably not a good thing, but you know, I hear the stories even now about the struggle of keeping the doors open, needing payroll, again, having access to capital, and the challenges of being a business owner. So more recently also, I had about a year ago, had a Women in Business Forum where I brought together people in government and women that are in business to find out, again, hear from them directly the challenges that they're facing. One story that stands out, Deb Giannini from Alpha Metalworks in Johnston, much the same story that my parents had struggled with over the course of their lives as well. But the same thing of trying to find the access to capital, skilled labor, both attracting and retaining the skilled labor. So, and these stories are emblematic of the businesses that I meet with across the 2nd Congressional District all the time. So when I have opportunities to support things like SBA loans, trying to get the loan guarantee, fight to get that back up to 90%, I know it's at 75% loan guarantee right now. These are things that I look to support. The Jobs Act that we passed that's going to make it easier to get access to capital for small businesses. These are things that we need to do because of the things that are facing businesses every day. So trying to be sensitive to their needs and finding ways to make it easier for business to operate and relieve some of the burdens that they're facing are always been a priority.
Now, presumably, each of you has given this next topic a lot of thought, and as has the folks in this room, and we've seen so many forums in the last several months, whether it be the Chamber Forum right in this room about the private sector leading economic development. We've had the Make It Happen. We've had the RIPEC report. We've had, as you indicated, the public occurrences and Leadership Rhode Island, and there have been many, many groups that have really expressed a great deal of frustration and outrage about our business climate ranking. So my question to you is, thinking specifically about Rhode Island, what is it that's holding us back? And what can you do to turn around and really accelerate our progress? Not just throw it out there. Anybody that wants to jump in, please feel free to do that. We'll have a lively exchange.
Thank you. It's the overall attitude of the business climate. We came in 50 out of 50 states for business.
And how does that make you feel?
It doesn't make me
How
feel
does the
too
congressional delegation, how do the candidates feel about representing a state where our business climate is really in a sorry state of affairs?
It's embarrassing. So let me just finish my thought. So we have the 2nd highest unemployment rate in the United States of America. This is a beautiful state. Beautiful little state. We should be a model state. We can do better than this. We must do better than this. But we need to look at tax reform. We need to look at the business community and listen to them, the B2G, the business to government communication, and listen to them to be able to roll the red carpet out for our business community.
So you're talking about tax reform locally or nationally?
Both. both. And I think it was Mike Riley mentioned licensure, it's regulations and licensure, state and federal. So, you know, we just need to be able to embrace our business community. Like I said, we have 93,000 small businesses here. Wouldn't it be nice if we could grow another 7,000 to 10,000 businesses to bring our friends and our folks that are on the unemployment rolls off the unemployment rolls and back to work? But to answer your question directly, it's tax reform, regulatory reform, the overall environment, negative environment on business, and we have to tackle that skill sets gap.
Lori, I get this question a lot because Rhode Islanders want to know what you can do for them. And of course, this is a federally elected position that I'm going to win in about 2 weeks. And you know, you can't directly influence Smith Hill with a legislative act because you're not on Smith Hill. But you can influence it with ideas. And the Colonel nailed it. It's the attitude we have in Rhode Island towards businesses. Smith Hill sees businesses as a place to harvest capital from. They don't see them as places that create jobs, which is why we have an incredibly high tax rate and, as the Colonel said, the worst environment in America to run a business. I mean, essentially, when you're in last place, you know, starting a business in Rhode Island is like trying to grow corn on asphalt. It just doesn't happen. You know, and I talk to business owners all the time, and when you're in a relationship and someone's mean to you, what do? You leave. And that's what businesses have done in Rhode Island, and unfortunately with them, we've lost about 100,000 residents in the last decade. Those people used to be here paying taxes. So the Colonel nailed it. It's the attitude we take towards business, realizing that businesses are who we work for, small businesses especially. But furthermore, realizing that when you're on a last place team and you're playing in a competitive league, doesn't it make sense to adopt the strategies of the teams that are winning? That's what they do in the NHL. That's what they do in the NFL. That's what they do in Major League Baseball. When you're getting your butt whooped, which we are getting our butt whooped by other states, you adopt the best strategies of the winning team. We completely ignore the strategies of the winning team. In fact, we double down on the losing strategies here in Rhode Island. So what can I do as a federally elected official? Something that we don't have today. Our delegation is all in with the Democratic Party. Fine, I like balance. How about a little balance in our delegation so we can actually influence Smith Hill? Because right now, they don't say a word. So when we go through pressing problems like the pension reform, not a word was said. When you have someone from the other party that's not ruling Smith Hill, the Republican Party, saying, why are you doing that? Why aren't you making Rhode Island's #1 priority to be in the top 5 of businesses instead of the bottom 5? So adopting the attitude, but pressuring Smith Hill to make Rhode Island the most successful place, the most attractive place in America, and possibly the world to do business. That needs to be the goal, and that's what we can do from this point of view.
Other thoughts on this topic?
I'd like to jump in. So there's 2 parts that I want to address. First of all, like many of us, you know, I'm frustrated that Rhode Island hasn't seen more robust job growth. And when you look at, you know, where we were and where we are, I think one of the problem areas we identified is that, you know, after we never replaced we lost our manufacturing jewelry industry, when we lost the Navy back in the 70s, we never replaced it with that thing of those anchor industries that are going to be really job creators for our state. So as a state, one of the things that we have to decide is what business do we want to be in, first of all, and put resources behind it to attract those, in a sense, also anchor industries. And we're also like a college football team that we're trying to attract the best and the brightest, yet we have no scholarships to offer, don't help with energy costs or housing when people come here, or food costs. So the idea of putting resources behind a jobs plan is going to be important. That does happen in major ways at the state level. And I'm glad to see the reorganization that EDC is going through right now, the state's going through. This is an opportunity for Rhode Island. But particularly at the federal level, you know, we can be a part of that solution of providing access to capital. And I talked about some of them just a minute ago with SBA loans and the Jobs Act that we just passed. But also the idea we need to address the problem of our skills gap in our state. As a co-chairman of the Career and Technical Education Caucus, in a bipartisan effort, we've been trying to address that. at both the state and a national level. Because how do you grow businesses here, or how do you attract businesses to Rhode Island if you don't have the skilled workers to do the jobs that are available? And that's one of the frustrations I know that businesses are encountering right now, that when I meet with businesses, the owners right now, and I ask, when are you going to be hiring, what are the job prospects for the future? And almost to a company, they're talking about, we have job openings right now, and we're struggling to find workers with the right skills to do those jobs. So we've got to get on top of addressing this skills problem that we have.
Okay, so let's peel back that onion about the lack of a trained workforce as we're fully engulfed in the knowledge economy. What is it that can be done within the next 12 months to really retool our workforce? Because, you know, Rome is burning.
Well, first I want to say thank you to the Chamber, because you've been such an important part of this development of the knowledge economy. But I want to just quickly respond to the question and then get to the workforce training. You know, I think the reality is there's not a single initiative that Rhode Island can engage in to fix our economy. I think it's a whole range of things that we have to do. Some of it has to do with leadership in terms of promoting our state as a great place to do business, some good old-fashioned salesmanship to bring businesses to Rhode Island and to market the strengths.
What do you think is the most potent weapon that we have in terms of promoting the environment for business in Rhode Island?
Well, I mean, I think
what is our best asset in
our
that?
best asset is our people and the assets of our great universities and healthcare institutions, our small businesses, but promoting and marketing our state's one part of it. Second part of it is workforce training, making sure that we have a workforce with the skills necessary for the jobs of the 21st century. Making sure we have a regulatory process that people can navigate, an expediter who can help people get through, whether it's at the local or state level, to get through permitting, and so that we become a state known for that's the place you can go to start a business and it's easy to navigate. Third is we have got to really recognize that we have incredible assets here. We have great universities, great healthcare institutions. The knowledge economy is a great example where we're trying to grow technology and innovation companies and sort of market both the knowledge district, but that sector of our state's economy. So build on the assets that we have. Workforce training is a very, very important part of this. You know, there was a proposal, and Jim has been a huge leader in the Congress on this issue, but there was a proposal that the Republican House leadership offered to almost eliminate the Workforce Investment Act. I mean, what we have to do is fight to invest in developing a workforce so that we have a workforce that can compete with the jobs that are available in the 21st century. And so having effective workforce training programs that work, listening to businesses, what kinds of skills do you need in this new employee? Having real conversations between the employer and the workforce training folks, so you're actually creating skills that meet the needs of the employer is key. But there's a federal role in this. Workforce Investment Act resources are important, and fighting to protect those so that we can be successful in creating a workforce with the skills necessary for the jobs that are available in the 21st century.
What is your view on the Workforce Investment Act, Mr. Doherty?
Well, first of all, that was a great speech, but I don't see any action. We've been talking about this for a few years now, and I believe we need to look at tax incentives to bring these companies to Rhode Island. Tax incentives, but not picking winners and losers. So we need to...
Tax incentives don't get to be dicey.
Well, they can.
In terms of government picking winners and losers, how would you draw a right line around that?
In a pragmatic way. We just need to do it carefully, so we're not just picking winners and losers and as a result of political favoritism. So, but we need to create that opportunity so businesses want to move in here. And like the Congressman said, and many members of this panel said, the skill sets gap is so important. That's something I talk about a lot. But we need to also, if we can bring companies in here, we have brain drain around. Matter of fact, my own son graduated from Brown University with a master's degree in entrepreneurial engineering, and there were not jobs here for him. He had to move out of state. He'd love to live here in Rhode Island, but he can't because there are not job opportunities for him. So we need to continue to grow in that area.
To your point about the Workforce Investment Act and the fight that David described in Washington, I think in Vice President Ryan's budget, the so-called Ryan budget that Speaker Boehner ran through the House, they actually get rid of the Workforce Investment Act. They replace it with something with a new name about, you know, specific career training, but nobody knows what that means. And it's in a pot in his budget that gets cut in the next 2 years by 24%. So it's nice to be able to talk about